The world before the storm. Close your eyes. Take a slow, steady breath in and breathe out. We are going somewhere old and vast and beautiful. We are going to the sea. Not the sea as it is today, but the sea as it was on a particular morning, long, long ago. The morning of the 21st of October, in the year 1805. A morning that would change the course of history. A morning that would be remembered, quietly and solemnly, for centuries to come. But we are not going there to feel the urgency of battle. We are not going there to feel afraid. We are going there slowly, gently, to drift across the water and to watch and to listen and to understand in a soft and unhurried way what it was like to be there, to be part of something enormous and ancient and deeply, deeply human. So let your body settle now. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands rest wherever they have fallen. Let your jaw unclench just a little. Let the muscles around your eyes soften. You are safe. You are warm. You are simply here, listening. And we are going to the sea. Part 1. The Atlantic in autumn. The Atlantic Ocean in October is a particular kind of gray. Not the sharp, cold gray of winter. Not the dull, flat gray of rain. It is a gray that holds the last warmth of summer somewhere deep within it. A gray that has memory in it. When you look at it from a distance, the water seems almost silver. It shimmers in the low morning light, rolling gently in long, slow swells that have traveled hundreds of miles to be here. Off the southwestern coast of Spain, near a cape called Trafalgar, a name that comes from the Arabic, meaning the Cape of Caves. The ocean gathers itself in these long, easy rhythms. The water is not choppy here, not today. It moves in great slow hills and valleys of dark water, patient and enormous, indifferent to the small wooden ships that ride upon its surface. And there are ships here, many ships. Imagine looking down from a great height, from somewhere up among the clouds where the light is pale and diffuse and soft, looking down at the grey water below and seeing scattered across that grey a fleet of ships, dozens of them, their white sails catching the light, their dark hulls sitting low in the water. They are very far from land. Spain is there, just visible on the horizon to the east. The low brown hills of Andalusia, the long flat stretches of coastline. But out here, in the middle of all that slow grey water, the ships seem wonderfully alone. Small against the vast Atlantic. Small, but somehow magnificent. They have names, these ships. Beautiful, serious names. Names given to them like names given to children. With hope and intention. There is the Victory, which is the largest of them all. There is the Temeraire, which will become famous in a painting that does not yet exist. There is the Bellerophon, and the Colossus, and the Neptune. There is the Redoutable, and the Bucentaur, and the Santissima Trinidad, the Holy Trinity, the largest warship in all the world. These names float on the water with the ships that carry them, moving slowly in the morning swell. Take a breath. Breathe in the salt air, if you can imagine it. The Atlantic air in October carries something sharp and clean in it. A kind of mineral coldness that fills the lungs and clears the head. Mixed with it, always, the smell of the sea itself. That ancient, deep, alive smell of brine and seaweed and distance. The ships smell different, wood and tar and canvas. Gunpowder stored below in the magazines, lying quiet and still and unlit. The smell of hundreds and hundreds of men. Their sweat, their food, their fears, held within wooden walls and carried across the water. But we will come to the men soon. For now, let us simply rest here on the water. Let us let the swells carry us up and down slowly, gently, the way the ocean breathes. Up and down, up and down. The water beneath us is very deep. Hundreds and hundreds of feet of cold, dark water, going down and down into the dark. Fish move through it. Tuna and mackerel and things without names, following their ancient paths through the cold. They do not know about battles. They do not know about empires. They simply move through the deep, cold, beautiful water, as they have always done, as they will always do. Part 2. The context of the moment. It is helpful, as you rest, to understand something of how we came to be here. On this grey October morning, with all these ships. The world of 1805 is a world at war. Not in the quick, modern way, not with aeroplanes and radio communications and decisions made in hours. War in 1805 moves at the speed of a horse, at the speed of a sailing ship, at the speed of a human being walking across a battlefield. It is slow war. It takes months, it takes years. Europe has been at war in one form or another for over a decade. It began in France, in the chaos and blood and extraordinary energy of the revolution. That great upheaval, that enormous tearing apart and rebuilding of a society, sent shockwaves outward through the whole continent. And out of it, eventually, came one man above all others, Napoleon Bonaparte. By 1805, Napoleon is the Emperor of France. He is 35 years old. He is short, famously, though perhaps not quite as short as the legend suggests. He has pale grey eyes that his contemporaries found unsettling. Eyes that seem to look through you rather than at you. He has already won battles that have become legend. Marengo, Austerlitz, which has not yet happened, in October 1805, but will happen before the year is out. He has remade the laws of France, rebuilt its government, reorganized its army into perhaps the finest military machine in the world. And he wants England. He has wanted England for years. Britain, wealthy, island protected, stubbornly independent, has been the great obstacle to Napoleon's ambitions. Britain funds the coalitions against him. Britain's navy keeps his ships from moving freely across the seas. Britain, with its damp green fields and its grey skies and its remarkable obstinacy, refuses to be defeated, refuses to negotiate, refuses to lie down. To invade Britain, Napoleon needs to cross the Channel. And to cross the Channel, he needs control of it, at least for long enough to get his army across. Just a few days. Just enough. For this, he needs his navy. The French Navy and the Spanish Navy, Spain is France's ally at this point, bound by treaty, are to come together into one great fleet, sail up through the Atlantic, seize control of the Channel approaches, and hold them long enough for Napoleon's enormous army, camped on the cliffs of Boulogne, to cross. The plan is sound in theory. In practice, it depends on the French and Spanish ships being able to outmaneuver or outfight or simply evade the British fleet. The British fleet is commanded by Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson. Let that name settle for a moment. Horatio Nelson. There is something in the name itself, a kind of music. Horatio, old-fashioned even in 1805. A name from the classical world, from Shakespeare. Horatio, who watches, who survives, who bears witness. He is 46 years old on this October morning. He is thin and not especially tall. He has lost the sight in his right eye, lost to a wound in battle years ago. He has lost his right arm too, gone at the shoulder, lost at the Battle of Santa Cruz. The stump healed over now, the coat sleeve pinned up or folded under. He dresses always in his uniform, covered in medals and decorations that he refuses to remove, even when they make him a conspicuous target. He knows he is conspicuous. He does not care. He is perhaps the most gifted naval commander who has ever lived. His tactical innovations, the way he thinks about fleet battles, the way he trusts his captains, the way he breaks the rules in the right ways, are extraordinary. He is also, by most accounts, a deeply warm and generous and charming man. His sailors adore him, his captains adore him, even the enemy admires him. He is also, as the morning of October the 21st begins, certain that he is going to die today. He has written his will. He has prayed. He has written a letter to his daughter Horatia, who is 4 years old and does not yet fully know who her father is. He has written a letter to Emma Hamilton, the woman he loves. A scandalous, complicated love, outside the bounds of the marriages of both of them, but real and deep and important to him. He rises this morning as he always does, methodically, calmly, with purpose. He is ready. Part 3. Aboard the Victory. The HMS Victory is the flagship of the British fleet. She is 40 years old in 1805. Old for a ship, but well-maintained, strong. She was launched in 1765, the year before Nelson was born. In a way, she has been waiting for him all her life. She is enormous by the standards of her time. 227 feet long from stem to stern. She displaces over 3,000 tons of water. She carries 104 guns arranged on 3 gun decks. She requires a crew of 850 men to sail and fight. Walking aboard the Victory, or rather, floating alongside her in your imagination, looking up at her, you are struck first by her height. From the waterline to the top of her mainmast is almost 200 feet. Her masts rise up into the pale sky, their yards spread wide, the sails either furled or catching what little wind there is. She looks like a great dark cliff rising from the water, pierced along her sides by the long black mouths of her gun ports. Inside her, it is another world. The lower decks are dark. The beams overhead are so low that a tall man must stoop. The air smells of wood and bilge water and tar. Light comes in through small ports and gratings, catching dust motes, catching the pale faces of the men who live here. And there are so many men. 850 of them, remember, on this one ship. Think of what it means to house that many people in a vessel 227 feet long. They sleep in hammocks, slung between the beams, so close together that the hammocks touch. They eat at tables that fall down from the walls. They live and work and joke and quarrel and miss their families and dream their dreams in this wooden world that sways and creaks and breathes with the motion of the sea. They come from everywhere. There are Englishmen, yes, from every part of England, from London and Cornwall and Yorkshire and the East Anglian marshes. But there are also Irishmen and Scotsmen and Welshmen. There are Americans. There are West Indians. There are men from Sweden and Holland and Portugal and the West African coast. The sea has always gathered the world's people together. The sea does not care where you were born. Many of them are young, terribly young, boys of 12 and 13 serving as powder monkeys, running cartridges of gunpowder from the magazine up to the guns during battle, small enough to move quickly through the smoke and chaos. They have not yet begun to shave. They have not yet seen their families become old. And others are ancient by the standards of their time. Men in their 40s and 50s who have spent their whole lives at sea, whose bodies carry the accumulated damage of decades of hard weather and hard work. Their hands are enormous, roughened to leather. Their faces are brown and deeply lined. They move around the ship with the quiet, efficient confidence of long familiarity. This morning, as the fleet forms up and the enemy fleet is sighted, there is a particular quality to the atmosphere aboard the Victory. It is not fear exactly, or not only fear, it is something more complex than that. It is the particular feeling of a moment before. The moment before something enormous and irreversible begins. The men are busy with their preparations, clearing the decks for action, opening the gun ports, bringing up powder and shot, sanding the deck so that blood will not make it slippery. These practical tasks give them something to do with their hands, something to concentrate on, something to prevent the mind from going to the places it would rather not go. There is also, among many of them, a curious calm. When you have been waiting for something for a long time, when you have known for weeks and months that this day was coming, there can be a strange release when it finally arrives. The waiting is over. Here it is. Here is the thing itself. Now we simply have to get through it. Nelson walks among them. He stops to speak to men by name. He knows many of their names. A remarkable thing given how many of them there are. He asks after their families, their health. He makes small jokes. He has a quality that very few people possess. The ability to make each person he speaks to feel, for the duration of that conversation, like the most important person in the world. The men straighten as he passes. Their chins lift. Their eyes brighten. They would follow him anywhere. They have followed him here. Part 4. The signal. At around 11 o'clock in the morning, Nelson gives an order that will outlive him. He turns to his signal officer, Lieutenant Pascoe, and tells him he wants to make a signal to the fleet. He wants to say, Nelson confides that every man will do his duty. The word confides is important to Nelson. To confide means to trust, to have faith in. He wants his men to know that he trusts them. He believes in them. He has confidence in them. Pascoe gently points out that the word confides is not in the standard signal codebook and would have to be spelled out letter by letter, which takes time. Would the Admiral consider using the word expects instead? Expects is in the codebook. Nelson considers and agrees. And so the signal flags are run up the mast of the Victory, one by one, in sequence. England expects that every man will do his duty. The signal is read across the fleet. Ship by ship, the officers read the flags and pass the message to their crews. In some ships, there are cheers. In others, a quiet, serious silence. In others, practical men who have been through battles before simply nod or say nothing at all and continue with what they were doing. There is, famously, one captain aboard another ship who says gruffly that he supposes everyone knows what they have to do, and that Nelson might just as well have waited, but the signal is transmitted. The words go out across the grey water from ship to ship, carried on the morning light. England expects that every man will do his duty. Breathe that in for a moment. There is something at once inspiring and heartbreaking about those words. Inspiring because they are a call to courage, to service, to something beyond oneself. Heartbreaking because so many of the men who hear them will not survive the day. The duty they are called to will cost them terribly. And yet, they answer the call. Because that is what human beings do sometimes when the moment arrives. They answer. Part 5. The formation. The British fleet approaches the Franco-Spanish fleet in 2 columns. This is Nelson's plan, and it is a bold one, almost reckless. The conventional wisdom of naval warfare at this time holds that fleets should approach each other in a line. A single long line of ships sailing parallel to the enemy line, exchanging broadsides until one side breaks or retreats. It is a slow, methodical way of fighting. It is also in many ways safe, or at least predictable. Nelson's plan is nothing like this. He proposes to sail his ships directly at the enemy line, cutting through it in 2 places. This means that his ships, approaching bow on, will present their most vulnerable face. The bow, which has very few guns, to the enemy for a long time before they can reply. They will absorb fire. They will be hit. They will take casualties before they can inflict any. But once they cut through the line, the situation reverses completely. The Franco-Spanish fleet will be cut into 3 sections: the van, the center, and the rear. The sections will be unable to support each other properly. The British ships, sailing into the gaps, will be able to rake their opponents, firing directly along the length of enemy ships, where a single broadside can travel the entire length of a gun deck, dismounting guns, killing and wounding dozens of men with a single volley. It is a violent, aggressive, decisive plan, and it works. But that comes later. For now, in the late morning light, 2 columns of British ships sail slowly toward the long line of Franco-Spanish ships on the horizon. The wind is very light, almost nothing. The ships barely move. This is, in a way, one of the most terrible aspects of the approach. A light wind means slow movement. It means the men aboard the British ships must wait and keep waiting as they creep toward an enemy who is already in position, already loaded, already watching. The waiting. There is music on some ships, drummers beating the battle rhythm, fifes playing old English tunes. On the Victory, a marine band plays on the quarterdeck. The music is strange and affecting in that context. The familiar old tunes hanging over the slow water, mixing with the creak of the rigging and the sound of the sea. Some men sleep. This is one of the famous things about battle. Experienced soldiers and sailors can sometimes sleep in the moments before it begins. Not from coldness or indifference, but from a kind of practical wisdom. You will need your energy later. Rest now while you can. Some men pray, on their knees, quietly, below decks or in corners of the deck, their lips moving. The prayers are simple, mostly. Let me live. Let me do my duty. Take care of my family if I do not come back. Some men write letters, though there is no way to send them today. They will be found on their bodies later, or sent home in bundles after the battle. And some men simply watch, standing at the rails, looking out across the grey water at the enemy fleet on the horizon, watching it get slowly larger. The ships are beautiful even now. Even under these circumstances, their white sails and their dark hulls, rising and falling with the slow Atlantic swells. The flags of their nations hanging from their masts. The French tricolor, the Spanish flag, the British white ensign. Flags snapping or hanging limp in the light wind. Below the waterline, the ocean continues its ancient business. The long swells move through, and the fish move through the dark water below, indifferent to everything above. Part 6. The men of the other side. Let us rest for a moment on the other side. The Franco-Spanish fleet is commanded on this day by Vice Admiral Pierre-Charles Villeneuve. He is 41 years old. He is a competent officer who has spent the last year in a situation that would have broken most men, caught between Napoleon's impossible demands and the practical realities of trying to command a fleet that is not fully prepared, not fully supplied, not fully ready for the fight that is being forced upon it. Villeneuve knows that Nelson is out there. He has known it for weeks. He has received intelligence reports. He understands with the clarity of a man who has faced Nelson before, at the Battle of the Nile, years ago, from which Villeneuve escaped, that Nelson is unlike other commanders. Nelson fights differently. Nelson wins. On the evening before the battle, Villeneuve writes in his own diary that he has no hope of victory. He simply hopes to do his duty and to die honorably. There is a profound sadness in that. A man of 41, commanding 21,000 other men, writing on the eve of battle that he hopes only to die well. The Spanish sailors, for their part, are in many ways the most sympathetic figures in this story. Spain did not entirely want this war. Spain has been drawn into Napoleon's orbit by necessity and treaty, rather than by genuine alignment of interests. The Spanish fleet, sailing alongside the French, has its own traditions, its own loyalties, its own history. Many of the Spanish sailors are fighting primarily for their country, their homes, their families, defending a coast they know, a sea they have fished in, a way of life they love. Among them, ordinary men, farmers' sons from the Spanish interior who have never seen the sea before they were pressed into service. Fishermen's sons from the Mediterranean coast, comfortable on water, but not in warships of this scale. Carpenters and coopers and rope makers and sail makers from the dockyards of Cadiz and Cartagena. They are not very different, these Spanish and French sailors, from the English and Irish and Scottish and Welsh sailors on the other side of the water. They are young, they are frightened, they love their families, they want to live. They will do what duty asks of them, and many of them will not survive the afternoon. Let us hold that thought gently, not with despair, but with the kind of tender attention that the dead deserve. These men on both sides, English and French and Spanish, they were real. They had faces and names and stories. They had mothers who had held them as infants, who had sung them to sleep, who had watched them grow. They had things they were hoping to do someday when the war was over. The war is not over. It is on this morning about to begin its worst day. Part 7, the first shots. At around noon, the first shots are fired. It begins as many terrible things begin, with a single act, a single gun firing from a single ship. The Fougueux, a French ship, fires on the Royal Sovereign, which is leading one of the British columns, and has, in the light wind, pulled slightly ahead of the rest of her column. The sound of a cannon fired in earnest. Not a salute, not a signal gun, but a gun fired in battle is one of the most powerful sounds in the natural world. The concussion of it can be felt in the chest, in the stomach, in the bones. The smoke that follows it is thick and white and acrid, smelling of sulfur. It billows out across the water, drifting slowly in the light wind. And then there are more shots, and more. And then, as the British ships reach the Franco-Spanish line and begin to fire their own broadsides, the noise builds and builds until it is not individual shots at all, but a continuous, rolling, terrible thunder. But let us not dwell on the violence. Let us instead, from our great height above the water, look at the shapes. Because from above, the battle is also a kind of geometry. Two lines intersecting. The slow, steady movement of wooden ships through grey water. The patterns they make as they maneuver, as some break free from the line, and some are taken captive, and some are sunk. It is, from high enough up, almost beautiful. This terrible human activity, rendered at the scale of ships and sea. The smoke from the guns drifts across the water in great grey-white clouds. By mid-afternoon, visibility across the battle will have dropped to almost nothing. The men aboard the ships will be fighting in a fog of their own making, barely able to see beyond the side of their own vessel. But that is later. For now, in the early minutes of the engagement, the guns are speaking one to one, ship to ship, and the battle is still something you can see. The Royal Sovereign cuts through the Franco-Spanish line first. Her captain, Cuthbert Collingwood, Nelson's closest friend, takes her between two enemy ships and fires a double-shotted broadside. In one ship, Over 400 men are killed or wounded by that single broadside. It is a number that is hard to hold in the mind. The Victory cuts through the line shortly after, close alongside the Bucentaur, Villeneuve's flagship. The Victory's bow passes so close to the Bucentaur's stern that the yardarms almost touch. And as she passes, she fires a single tremendous broadside directly through the Bucentaur's stern windows, a raking shot that travels the entire length of the French flagship, killing and wounding over 400 men in an instant. Breathe. Let us rest in this for a moment. Let us rest in the strange, terrible majesty of it. The wooden ships, the grey water, the white smoke, the flags still flying, the extraordinary courage of the men on both sides, continuing to fight, continuing to stand at their guns, in conditions that were beyond anything most of us will ever experience. Part 8. The Redoubtable. Among all the ships in the battle, one commands our particular attention now. The Redoubtable. The name means the one to be feared. She is a French ship of the line, commanded by Captain Jean Lucas. Lucas is a small man, famously short, shorter even than Napoleon, with an outsized will and an extraordinary eye for detail. In the months before the battle, knowing that his guns and his gunnery could not match the British, he has trained his men in a different skill: sharpshooting. His sailors and marines have practiced with their muskets every day. They have become, by the day of the battle, the finest sharpshooters in the fleet. The Redoubtable comes alongside the Victory in the confusion of the early afternoon battle. The two ships are locked together, their sides touching, their guns too close to depress enough to fire at each other. Lucas's men attempt to board the Victory. Nelson's men fight them off with swords and pikes and pistols on the crowded decks. The fighting is close and desperate and terrible. And in the tops of the Redoubtable, the platforms partway up the masts, Lucas's sharpshooters are firing down at the Victory's deck. The distance from the top of the Redoubtable to the quarterdeck of the Victory, where Nelson is walking, is about 50 feet. It is not a difficult shot. At approximately 1:30 in the afternoon, a musket ball strikes Nelson in the left shoulder. It passes through his epaulette, the decorative gold shoulder piece of his uniform, and travels down through his body, breaking his spine, passing through a lung, lodging 2 inches from the left side of his spine in the muscles of his back. He falls. He falls to his knees first, catching himself on his one hand, then slowly, slowly to the deck. His secretary, John Scott, has already been killed. Several others are wounded nearby. A sergeant of Marines sees him fall and runs to him. His captain, Thomas Hardy, kneels beside him. Nelson says, "I believe they have done it at last." He says, "My backbone is shot through." He knows immediately, with the certainty of a man who has been in battles before, what kind of wound this is. He knows that he is dying. He is carried below, down through the ship to the surgeon's cockpit in the orlop deck, the lowest deck, below the waterline, where the wounded are brought. He is laid on a pallet, there among the other wounded men, in the dark, in the smell of blood and gunpowder, while the battle continues to thunder around and above him. Let us be with him here for a moment. In the dark and the noise, breathing, he is in pain, great pain, but he is calm. He asks repeatedly about the progress of the battle. He asks for water. He asks for Hardy. Hardy cannot come immediately. He is needed on the quarterdeck, commanding the ship in the midst of the fighting. But he comes when he can. He comes twice. The first time, he tells Nelson that 14 or 15 enemy ships have struck their colors. That is, lowered their flags in surrender. The battle is won. Nelson's plan has worked. Nelson says, that is well. But I bargained for 20. Even now, even dying, still thinking tactically, still hoping for more. He says other things. He says, take care of poor Lady Hamilton, take care of my daughter. He says, thank God I have done my duty. He says it several times as the afternoon goes on, between periods of delirium and terrible thirst. Thank God I have done my duty. At 4:30 in the afternoon, 3 hours after he was shot, Nelson dies. Hardy is with him. The surgeon, William Beatty, is with him. Several of the men from the crew who have asked to come down and be near him are nearby. The battle is, by now, effectively over. 20 of the 33 Franco-Spanish ships have been captured or destroyed. Not a single British ship has been lost. Nelson's victory is complete. Part 9, the aftermath. After the guns fall silent, and they fall silent gradually, one by one, as the last of the fighting ends in the late afternoon, the sea is a different kind of terrible. The water is covered in wreckage, broken masts and spars, torn canvas, the thousand small objects that the sea claims in a battle. Hats, shoes, letters, belaying pins, rum barrels, prayer books, playing cards, and men. The casualty figures from the Battle of Trafalgar are enormous and hard to comprehend. On the British side, 458 killed, 1,208 wounded. On the Franco-Spanish side, approximately 4,500 killed or wounded, and another 7,000 taken prisoner. These are not abstractions. These are human beings, each with a face, each with a name, each with someone at home who loves them and does not yet know. The sea around the battle site is, by early evening, very still. The light is going out of the sky, the sun lowering towards the western horizon, turning the grey water briefly, beautifully, to gold and rose. On the horizon, the storm clouds that have been building since morning are now very dark. A storm is coming. In the days after the battle, the storm will scatter and sink many of the captured ships, drowning men who have already survived the battle. It will be, in some ways, an even greater disaster than the battle itself for the Franco-Spanish forces. But on the evening of October the 21st, the storm has not yet arrived. There is just the still water and the wreckage and the last light. The surviving British ships are in various states of damage. The Victory herself has taken heavy fire. Her sails are shot through with holes. Several of her masts are damaged. Her decks have been cleaned of blood, or as much as can be cleaned in an afternoon. Her flag still flies. Nelson's body is being preserved for the long voyage home. He will be buried at St. Paul's Cathedral in London in January of 1806, with enormous ceremony and public grief. He will be mourned as perhaps no other British public figure had been mourned before him. The nation will weep for him openly and without embarrassment, because he was theirs. He was England's. He was ordinary and extraordinary at once, a Norfolk clergyman's son who rose to become the greatest naval commander who ever lived, who took a musket ball in the left shoulder on a grey October morning and died knowing, at least, that he had won. The news will reach London on November the 5th, 1805. It will be brought by Lieutenant Lapenotier, who rides through the night, 150 miles from Falmouth to London, changing horses 21 times, to deliver the dispatch to the Admiralty. He arrives at the Admiralty at 1 in the morning. He is shown into the Secretary of the Admiralty, William Marston, who is still at work. Lapenotier says simply, "Sir, we have gained a great victory, but we have lost Lord Nelson." And Marsden, who was there to receive the words, later wrote that he could never forget the effect they had on him. Part 11. The Long Consequence. The consequences of the Battle of Trafalgar were vast and long-lasting. Napoleon's plan to invade England died with the destruction of the Franco-Spanish fleet. He never invaded England. He turned instead to land campaigns, to Austerlitz, to Jena, to the great Eastern campaigns that would eventually bring him to Moscow. He became the master of Europe's land, just as Britain became and remained the master of its seas. For the next 100 years, the Royal Navy ruled the world's oceans, not unchallenged, but dominant. The empire that Britain built in the 19th century was built on naval power, and the foundations of that naval power were laid at Trafalgar. The loss of Nelson was something else. It was a wound in British culture that did not quite heal. He became a legend almost instantly. Not a political legend, not an ideological legend, but a human legend. People who had never met him mourned him personally. His last signal, "England expects that every man will do his duty," became one of the most famous phrases in the English language. repeated and echoed for generations. In Trafalgar Square in London, which was not yet built when Nelson died, but which would eventually bear his name, stands a column 170 feet tall, and at the top of it, a stone statue of Nelson, 14 feet high, looking south, looking toward the sea, looking perhaps toward that gray October morning and all those ships and all those men. He has been looking south from that column for nearly 200 years. The pigeons sit on his stone shoulders. The wind blows around him. The traffic moves below. London changes and grows and transforms and hardly notices him anymore, except occasionally when someone looks up. But he's there, still watching. Part 12. On the water in the evening. Let us return to the sea now. Let us return to the water. It is evening off Cape Trafalgar. The sun is going down behind the dark shapes of the storm clouds to the west, and the light it throws across the water is deep and golden. The sea, which was grey this morning, is now amber and rose and the deepest, richest blue you have ever seen. The long swells are still moving through. They have been moving through all day, indifferent to everything that has happened on their surface. They were here before the ships arrived. They will be here long after the ships are gone. Up and down, up and down. There is nothing here now except the water and the last light. The ships are making their way to harbor, or what remains of them, damaged and slow-moving, nursing their wounds. The wreckage that covered the water this afternoon is dispersing, sinking, drifting south on the current toward Africa. The birds have returned. Gulls and gannets circling high above the water, calling to each other in their thin, wild voices. They do not know what happened here today. They only know that there is food in the water, always food in the water after a battle, and that the evening light is beautiful. Far below, the fish are moving through the dark water. Tuna, long and silver, chasing mackerel through the deep. Strange, slow things that live on the bottom, in the permanent dark, in the absolute cold. The water holds everything. Breathe with it now, in the slow rhythm of the swells, in and out, up and down, the sea breathing around you, and you breathing with it. You're floating here on this October evening. The light is golden and soft. The air smells of salt and distance. Somewhere far to the east, the lights of the Spanish coast are beginning to appear. Small yellow lights in the darkness of the hills, the lights of towns and villages, where people are sitting down to their suppers, where children are being put to bed, where the world is going about its ordinary, beautiful, ordinary business. They do not yet know what happened here today. The news will travel slowly. It will travel at the speed of ships and horses. It will reach Cadiz tonight or tomorrow. It will reach Madrid in a week. It will reach Paris in 2 weeks. It will reach London on the 5th of November, as we have said, at 1 o'clock in the morning. For now, the sea simply holds the silence of the evening. The silence that comes after enormous things. The silence that is not empty but full. Full of everything that was and everything that will be. Part 13. A meditation on ships. There is something about a sailing ship that speaks very deeply to something in human beings. Perhaps it is because a sailing ship is, at its heart, a made thing that has found a way to work with the forces of nature rather than against them. The sail does not fight the wind. It gathers it. It accepts it. It uses what is given, or perhaps it is the wood. A sailing ship is made of wood, living material that was once a tree, that grew for decades or centuries in some English forest or Baltic pine wood, that had rings inside it marking years. When you touch the wood of a ship, you are touching something that was once alive in a different way. The wood still has memory in it, still has the grain of its life recorded in its fibers. The ships of Trafalgar were made of oak. English oak mostly, for the British ships. Dense and dark and incredibly hard. A single first-rate ship like the Victory required the wood of approximately 2,000 mature oak trees. Trees that had grown for 60 or 80 or 100 years in the forests of England. Trees that had been cut down and dried and shaped and joined with iron bolts and copper fastenings into this fast floating structure. When a cannonball hit the side of such a ship, it did not simply punch a clean hole through it. The wood splintered. Great shards and splinters of dense oak, moving at very high speed, flew through the gun decks. In many battles, the majority of wounds were caused not by the cannonballs themselves, but by the wood they set in motion. This is one of the details of wooden ship warfare that is hard to sit with. The ships that were supposed to protect their crews also, in the worst moments, became dangerous to them. But in gentler moments, in the long weeks of sailing between battles, in the early mornings and the late evenings, when the work was done and the wind was fair, the wood of a ship was simply home. The familiar creak of it, the smell of it, the particular note it played in a storm, deep and resonant, like a great instrument being played by the wind. The men who lived on these ships for months and years at a time knew every sound their ship made. They could tell, in the dark of a sleepless night, from the sound of the rigging and the movement of the hull, exactly what the weather was doing. They were attuned to their ship the way you become attuned to a house you have lived in for years, to its particular sounds, its particular settling, its particular way of being. There is something deeply peaceful in that thought. The ship as home, the sea as a kind of traveling home, always moving, never arriving, always on the way somewhere. Close your eyes. If they are open, Feel the slow movement of the water beneath you, the long, easy swells, the ship's deck moving just slightly under your feet, the sound of the rigging in the light wind, the smell of the sea. You are safe here. The battle is over. The evening light is soft and golden. The sea is going to sleep. Part 14. The night after. The night after the Battle of Trafalgar is a night of fires and storms and terrible quiet. Some of the captured ships are burning. The fires are visible from miles away. Great orange pillars of light reflected in the dark water, sending showers of sparks up into the storm-dark sky. The fires are beautiful from a distance, in the terrible way that fires at sea have always been beautiful. Some ships explode. A magazine catches, and the whole ship goes up in an instant. A thunderclap of fire and wood and metal. The shockwave travels across the water. On other ships, men stop what they are doing and look. Then they go back to work. There is so much work. The wounded must be cared for. The ships must be sailed. The prizes, the captured ships, must be secured. Their remaining crews managed. Their damage assessed. All of this in the gathering darkness, with the storm coming. Below decks on the Victory, Nelson is dead. His body has been placed in a barrel of brandy for preservation. Not a dignified end, but a practical one. The surgeon, William Beatty, has taken the musket ball from his back. The ball is small and very ordinary looking. A piece of metal about the size of a marble. It does not look like the thing that killed the greatest naval commander of the age. But then most of the things that change history look very ordinary when you hold them in your hand. Hardy, Nelson's captain, sits in his cabin in the early hours of the morning. He is writing his dispatches. He must find words for what happened today. He must find words for the victory, and for the cost of it, and for the loss of the man who made it possible. The words do not come easily. They never do for these things. Outside, the storm is beginning to build. The wind is picking up. The barometer is falling. The sea, which was deceptively calm for the battle, is beginning to show its true October character, beginning to build the long, grey, powerful swells that will scatter the fleet in the days to come. But for now, in this small cabin, on a damaged ship, on a dark October sea, a man sits at a desk by lamplight, dipping his pen in ink, writing words that will carry the news of a great victory and a great loss across the water to England. The lamp sways with the motion of the ship. The shadows on the walls move and shift. The pen scratches across the paper. Outside, the Atlantic breathes. Part 15. Returning to rest. We have been on this water for a long time now. Through the morning and the afternoon and the evening and the night. We have watched the ships and the men and the battle and the aftermath. We have watched history happen slowly, in the way that history always happens, through the accumulation of individual decisions and individual courage and individual fear and individual love, through the decisions of Nelson to put on his medals and walk the quarterdeck in full view of the enemy sharpshooters, through the decision of Lucas to train his men in musketry, through the decision of the young powder monkeys to keep running with their cartridges, even when the smoke was so thick they could barely see. Through all of these individual decisions, the battle happened. And through the battle, the course of European history changed. Napoleon never came to England. His fleet was broken here, off this grey cape, in this October light. England remained England. The island stubbornly kept itself. And the men came home, those who survived. They came home to families who had waited for them, who had not known through all the long months whether they were alive or dead. They came home changed, as men who have been through battles always come home changed. The things they had seen and done were in them, and they would not entirely leave. Some found peace, some did not. Some went back to sea, because the sea was the only home they had. Some never went back. What they had in common, all of them, English, French, Spanish, whatever their nation, whoever their commander, was that they had been there. They had been on the water that October morning. They had heard the guns and smelled the smoke and felt the ship move under their feet. They had done what was asked of them. They had done their duty, and the sea had received them. Those who survived and those who did not. The sea had received all of it. The courage and the fear, the victory and the loss, the names of the ships and the faces of the men. And it had held all of it in its deep, grey, beautiful indifference. And it had gone on moving as it always does. Up and down, up and down. Let your body settle now. Let the memory of this October morning settle into you softly. The grey water, the white sails, the long swells moving through. You're safe. The battle is long over. The sea is still there, exactly as it always was, moving in its ancient rhythms, holding its ancient silences, going about its ancient business of being vast and deep and beautiful and indifferent and real. The fish are moving in the dark water below. The birds are settled for the night on the water, rocking with the swells. The light has gone now. The stars are out, all those southern stars, unfamiliar to northern eyes, brilliant and steady above the dark Atlantic. Let your breathing slow, in and out, in and out. The water is moving beneath you, slow and immense and kind. You do not need to think about anything now. You do not need to do anything now. All the ships have sailed. All the guns have fallen silent. All the flags have been lowered, one by one, into the night. Only the sea remains, and you floating on it, and the stars above reflected in the dark water below, so that you're surrounded by stars. Stars above and stars below, and you floating in the middle of all that light, rocking very gently with the motion of the water, held perfectly, weightlessly, in the dark. This is where you rest. This is where you sleep. Let the night have you. Let the sea have you. Let the darkness be gentle and total and kind. You are safe. You are held. The battle is over. The day is done. Sleep now. Sleep.